Hello everyone, welcome back to Data Bracket. In this demonstration, we are going to implement an end-to-end ADF pipeline. So this pipeline is a simple implementation of data load activity in parallel. Here we can see that the pipeline is reading a config table from SQL Server, and for every iteration of that configuration table, so this is the configuration table that we are going to build from scratch, and for every item in this configuration table, the pipeline will query the target tables using this table name and the table schema. Following, if the load flag is 1, the data will be loaded into ADLS. If not, it will be skipped and the data will be loaded to the respective ADLS path, which is nothing but the blob storage. So let's get right into the implementation part. So first thing first, let's create our table definition. So table definition will look something like this, where we are creating a table under the DBO schema, which is already present in our dummy database of SQL Server. So this is a dummy database that I created on Azure SQL Server, and I have logged in from my SSMS locally. So I'm naming it ADLS load config with 4 column names. So let's create this table. So if we query this table, we'll find nothing in this table. So our first goal is to load the table schema and the table name from the inbuilt information schema information schema dot tables will have the information we need. So if we query this table, we can see that we have table schema and the table name. So let us load these table schemas and table names into our generated table, which is nothing but ADLS load config. I have a query created for that already. So the query will look something like this. So here we are inserting into our table. Only we are taking table schema and table name, and we are selecting the table schema and table name from the information schema tables, where the table schema is sales LT. We are not considering DBO or sys for now. Just let's take the table schema only for sales LT, and we load the table names and table schema into our target config table. So if I execute this, the data should be loaded in. So 13 rows are loaded into our config table, and our load flag and the ADLS path is null for now. So let's set that also. Let's update our table, and let's first update all the load flags to 0, and let's make ADLS path with a suffix of load test followed by the table name. So this will generate a column value something like this. So it will say that load test slash the table name. This will be the ADLS path where our data will be saved from the ADF pipeline. And let's set few of these flags to 1 so that our data load will occur. So let's update only 2 columns for now. So I'm updating the table and setting load config flag to 1, where table name is only customer and product. So only this 1 and 5 will be updated, and the load flag will be set to 1. Only 2 rows are affected. So let's run this again. Yeah, only these 2 are affected now, and these 2 tables will be loaded alone into our ADF pipeline. So let's get into generating and building our ADF pipeline now. All right, here we are in our Azure portal. So I have created a data factory already by name data factory -proto. So I'm gonna launch my data factory now, and I have already created linked services for SQL Server and blob storage connection. I'll show you how you can do that as well. So before we get into the pipeline generation, we create the linked service for that. So for that, we can go to manage, and here we have linked services. So if you click on new, it will give you all the available options for you to generate or create linked services. So linked services are nothing but connection strings that allow us to connect to different Azure resources from different Azure resources. Like if we want to connect to SQL Server from Data Factory, we can use linked services for that Azure SQL. Or if we want to connect to blob storage, we can use the linked service to connect to blob storage. These things can be parameterized again, and we will see how to parameterize the inputs to these linked services in our copy data activity that we are going to see. So we need a SQL Server first to connect to our SQL Server. You can click on Azure SQL Server, continue, and you can name it anything you want, and you can select the subscription, which is your Azure account is being built. The server name will be the SQL server that you created in your Azure SQL portal. So my server says demo database 9, so I'm selecting that, and the database name is also DemoDB. So I've selected that, and for authentication you can pass the username and password. And that's all that is needed for you to generate a link service for Azure SQL connection. Since I already have a link service, I'm not going to click on create, but if I click on test connection, you can see that the connection will occur, and I can save this, or you can save this as well, so the connection says successful. That is all it takes for you to create a link service. So let's cancel this. And the same applies for blob storage as well. You can simply click on blob storage, continue, and you can select the subscription and the storage account that you have, and that's it. That's all you have to do to create a blob storage link service. So with that out of the picture, let's get to our pipeline now. We go to the author section, and inside the pipelines, let's create a pipeline. Let's call this dummy load pipeline. For the lack of a better name, I'm calling it dummy load. So first thing we need is to query our SQL table. For that we need a lookup activity. So everything in Azure is an activity. So if you go to any different sections here, copy data, this is an activity, data flow, this is an activity, and we have many activities. These are called activities. So we need lookup activity to query our SQL table, the config table. So I'm going to call this config lookup, for lack of a better name. So once our lookup is named, next thing is we have to go to settings, and we have to select the source data set where we want to do the lookup. In our case it is SQL table, so I'm going to select Azure SQL table, and it gives us option to either select the query or table. I'm going to do select query, and in the query we can write SQL query select all from whatever the table name. Right, for making this more dynamic, let's use parameters and variables. So let's generate a pipeline variable. So if you click on this pipeline canvas, right, the home canvas, you will see all these 4 options. If you click on lookup, you will see properties or options specific to this lookup. If you click outside this lookup, you will see the pipeline settings or variables. So let's go to variable and create a new variable. Let's call this config table name, and let's put our config table name here, dbo dot, what was the table name that I gave it? I forgot. ADLS load config. Right, this is our table name, right? And let's create one more variable, load flag. Let's call this load flag. Let's give the default value as 1. That is enough for now. Let's come back if we need more variables. So let's go to config lookup, and inside the query we can create dynamic queries. Like we can concatenate multiple elements and we can generate one single query. So to do that, we can go to the functions. We have string function here, and you can see so many functions are available, like string operations. Let's use concatenate for now, and inside the concatenate we can add strings, or you can add other elements, and everything will be concatenated into one string. So I'm going to do this as select all from. So this is one element of the string, and we are going to concatenate it with our pipeline variable. If we go to the variable section here, we will see the variables. So we will select all from our config table. This has to be single quotes, and let's add one more comma, and let's add one more section to concatenate, space, where, what was our load flag name from the table? It is load underscore flag, right? Load underscore flag equal to, comma again, load flag. So this will load our first 2 values from this table, which have load flag equal to 1. So let's try executing this. So If you want only one row to be displayed, you can enable the check mark, but I want to see both rows, so I'm disabling this. So let's try running this and see if this is working as expected. So if you want to test everything once you develop before you publish it, you can click on the debug option. This will use Azure's inbuilt runtime environment. Azure provides runtimes, right? So if we go to manage, we can see integration runtimes. It is called integration runtime. So by default, Azure gives auto integration runtime. This will be available by default. If you want to create your own using your virtual machines, you can create your own integration runtime, but this is the default one, and this will be little pricey compared to the one that you create. So that is again discussion for a different session. Our config table is successfully executed, and we can see that the input, so this is the query that is generated from our dynamic input that we give to the config. Select all from our table name, which we picked from the pipeline variable, where load flag equal to, again, this one also came from our pipeline variable, and our output has two elements. So both the tables where load flag equal to 1, right? So this looks good so far. Now the next part is to write this data for every element of this response we got from our lookup. We will use this elements of this JSON dictionary, and we will iterate it over, and we will write that table to ADLS in a loop. So let's see how we can do that. So we need a for loop to iterate over the response we got from this lookup. So the iterations and conditional section have the for loop. So we can drag and drop it onto our canvas, and we can connect the on success to our for each activity. So we are actually passing the output from the lookup to our for each on success. So we can click on this for each, and we can name this anything we want, like parallel write. Let's name it parallel write to ADLS for now, and this is activated. If you right click, you will see option to deactivate. If you deactivate, you can see that it will be deactivated. That is secondary, and I'm going to activate this activity. And if for this for each, we need to highlight like what input it needs to take. So this for loop have two options. One is sequential and other is parallel. If you select sequential, this batch count option will be gone, and all the config elements that we got, right, two elements, those two will be executed in sequence. First element will be executed, and upon completion second element will be. If we disable this and give a batch count, like let's say 5, so first 5 elements will be executed in parallel, and next 5 elements will be executed after the completion of first 5 elements. So let's use this option to execute all our lookup responses in parallel. I'm going to give this 2 for now. Depending on your use case, you can increase or decrease this. And for the items, we want the output of this lookup to be the input of the for each. So if we go click on this, we will see this add dynamic content option here. So if we click on this, we can see that the activity outputs. So the config lookup activity output is there, the count is there, value array is there. These are all the different elements that this activity is returning. So we are interested in the activity output and value of that particular output. Why I'm selecting the value here is, if we see the output response, right, of this JSON have this value flag, and inside this value flag we have our array. This array is going to be iterated over by this for loop for each activity. So we need to mention which element of this JSON object we want to pick it in specific and pass it to the for loop. That's why I've selected that value, output.value. So that is in place. So we have to add activity inside our for loop now. Let's click on this edit button. Inside this for loop activity, let's click on the copy activity. So the copy activity will copy the data to ADLS or any other linked service, SQL server or whatever linked service you want. So I'm dragging the copy activity here. So the copy activity needs two important information to be passed. So let's name this first parallel write. So the activity will take the data from the source, right? So the source data set is our Azure SQL. So I'm going to select Azure SQL, and here we are going to use query to query the data. So the query is again going to be the element from our loop. So let's build our dynamic query. I'm going to click on add dynamic content, and I'm going to use string function which is concat, and inside concat let's select all from the element should be our for each iterator, which is named as parallel write to ADLS. This is the for each iterator name of the for each iterator. The item inside the for loop, you will get this item element. And on this item you can call the object name just by using the dot notation. If I click on dot table schema, so for that every element of this response we got, right? Let's go to that. So for this response first element, this is our item. This is our item for first loop. So if I pick item dot table schema key, this value will be picked. If I select item dot table name key, customer value will be selected. So that's how the for loop responses work. So in this we are going to use that schema followed by a dot followed by again item dot table name. So what this will generate is select all from sales lt dot customer or person, whatever the config table is returning, it will be passed to that statement. So this is our table. Let's load everything into our ADLS at once. So this is our dynamic query, and source data is picking up the table data for every table, right? So select all from sales t dot customer. So this entire table will be loaded into ADLS in one iteration of the loop. So now at the sync. So sync also need a linked service to write to wherever you want to write it to. So let's create a new linked service which is blob storage, and let's have a Parquet format, and we want the linked service to be our blob storage, and these are the values that we have to pass. So let's come back to that in a while. So I'm not going to import the schema from connection store or sample file. I'm not going to import any schema for that matter. I'm going to click OK. So we have our sync dataset linked service Parquet. So let's edit this. I'll click on open. So we have our file path, directory and file name that this linked service wants to write the data. So let's use parameters here. So again, parameters are similar to variables. So let's create a parameter called container, one more parameter called directory, and one more parameter called file name, and everything is of type string. So let's go back to our connection section, and here we can use that parameter. So we can pass this parameter dynamically, and for directory we can use directory parameter, and for file name we can use file name parameter. Now the question arises, from where will the values for this elements be picked from, right? So if we go back to our pipeline now, strangely enough we can see that the three of these elements are required in order to complete this linked service connection. So let's pass the input to the container as dummy, because I have a dummy container named dummy in my Azure blob storage. So the directory name, I'm going to pick it from my SQL table. So I want this to be my directory name, load/test/customer. So I'm going to go to my for each item dot, I'm going to use ADLS path element of that JSON response from our lookup table. This is good. So for the file name, I'm going to again use item dot, let's call it as table name. Let's concatenate this. Through concat we can simply add dot Parquet extension to this, right? So the file name will look like customer.parquet product.parquet. So that is how I want the file to look like. So click on OK, and the copy behavior, we want the schema or hierarchy to be same from the source to destination. So I'm going to preserve the hierarchy, and the rest of the options are again detailed and little advanced. Let's not get into that. And we don't need any other sections for this data load, just source and sink are enough. So let's get back to our dummy data load and try to trigger this. Before that, let me go to my storage account and clear up the dummy data bucket. So let's just go into this and try deleting the file. Files can be deleted, right? Let's see if we can delete this. No, we can't delete the directory or the folder. Let's delete product, also delete blob snapshots. We don't have anything in the load test. We don't have load test itself. We delete the file, the container that is holding those elements are also be deleted. So we don't have any blobs, we only have the dummy container, and we don't have any buckets. So let's trigger our pipeline now, and let's wait for the execution to complete. So the lookup, as we know, will get 2 elements, and for every element the for each activity will write that table data into our storage account, and the naming convention will also be as per our config table. So the lookup activity was successful, which was already done. So the parallel write is happening now, and our pipeline is executed successfully, and we can see the data write is also successful. Let's see if we have any data in our storage account. So we have the load test folder. Inside that we have customer and product for those two specific tables. Inside the customer we have the customer.parquet, which was picked up dynamically by the pipeline from the config table, and product.parquet. Awesome, guys. I think that's all we have for this demo, and we learned something new in this session. If this was useful, please do hit a like and leave a comment. If you have any specific tutorial you want to be crafted and published, I can do that for you. And please do subscribe if you don't want to miss out on any upcoming videos or amazing tutorials on DevOps, MLOps or data engineering. Thanks for sticking till the end. Have a good day, guys. Bye.